You ever have one of those moments where life punches you right in the face, but instead of knocking you down, it accidentally hands you the key to everything? Yeah, that was me. By the way, before I dive into this insane story, if you enjoy stories about revenge, justice, and crazy corporate backfires, don't forget to hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. I was sitting there, minding my own business, when my boss, Robert Stanton, stormed into my office like a hurricane dressed in a $1,000 suit. No knock, no hello, just this smug, arrogant energy that filled the room before he even opened his mouth. "Daniel," he snapped, tossing a file onto my desk like it was a piece of trash. "We need to talk now." I looked at the folder, then back at him. This man, this walking ego wrapped in polished leather shoes, had been my boss for the last 5 years. The type who only learned your name if you brought him coffee or helped boost his quarterly reports. To him, I was just invisible. Background noise. Someone to crunch numbers, build financial models, clean up his messes, while he played corporate king, shaking hands and taking credit for things he didn't even understand. And I'd put up with it for years, quiet, calm, patient, because, well, sometimes you play small, just long enough to watch everyone else show you exactly who they are. Robert didn't sit. He never did when he wanted to intimidate someone. Instead, he stood over me like some kind of wannabe alpha, arms crossed, chin tilted up like he was doing me a favor just breathing the same air. "The board has decided to restructure," he said, voice dripping with fake sympathy. "We're moving in a different direction. And unfortunately, that means we no longer need someone in your position." I blinked, once, slowly. "You're firing me?" He smiled, that kind of smile that makes your skin crawl, the kind of smile that people wear when they think they've won. "Let's not be dramatic, Daniel," he said, waving his hand like he was swatting a fly. "It's just business. You're good at tasks, numbers, but leadership, vision, that's not really your strength, is it?" Oh, the irony. You see, what Robert didn't know, what absolutely no one in this company knew, is that there's a fine, beautiful line between being overlooked and being underestimated. And he had just crossed it. Hard. But I didn't flinch. Didn't give him the satisfaction of even a raised eyebrow. Just nodded, calm, steady, letting him dig his own grave with every word that came out of his mouth. "Your badge? Your laptop? We'll need them by the end of the day," he said, turning toward the door like this conversation wasn't even worth his full attention. "Security will disable your access by 5. I stood up, extended my hand. "Thank you for the clarity, Robert." He actually hesitated. Like, for a split second, his brain didn't know how to process me not falling apart, not begging, not even asking why. But then, the smug came back, full force. He shook my hand, patted my shoulder like he was sending me off to an early retirement, and walked out, head high, king of nothing. And as that door clicked shut behind him, something strange happened. I didn't feel sad, or angry, or even embarrassed. No, I felt lighter, because Robert Stanton had absolutely no idea that the man he just fired secretly owned 90% of the entire company. But we'll get to that. First, let me tell you how we got here. It's funny how people show you exactly who they are when they think you can't do anything about it. See, this wasn't the first time Robert made it clear what he thought of me. Not even close. For years, I sat in meetings where my ideas were nodded at, politely, then 5 minutes later, magically repackaged as someone else's brainchild, usually his. I remember one time, clear as day, I suggested a new pricing model that could have saved the company almost $8 million a year. Robert barely glanced up from his phone, gave me this half smirk and said, "Yeah, maybe, let's table that." 2 weeks later, guess what? He walks into the quarterly meeting with the board and presents my exact idea, word for word, like it fell out of his mouth fully formed from the genius heavens, and everyone applauded, slapped him on the back, called him innovative, forward-thinking. Meanwhile, I sat there, invisible. But that's the thing about people like Robert. They don't just crave success, and they crave being seen as the source of success, even when it's built on someone else's back. You'd think that would have been the last straw, right? Nope. I stayed. Quiet. Watching. Learning. Because sometimes the best way to beat a lion is to let him believe you're just grass. It wasn't just the stolen credit. Oh no. There were the passive-aggressive comments too, the backhanded compliments during team meetings. Daniel's great with numbers. But not everyone's cut out for leadership. Or not everyone's built to handle the pressure of high-level decisions. Some people just do better behind a desk. Every time he said it, people would glance at me, some with pity, others with that fake little office smile that says, "Hey, better you than me, buddy." But you know what? I didn't snap. I didn't argue. Because Robert, like so many others, made the fatal mistake of thinking silence meant weakness. He had no idea. Silence is just strategy. And my strategy was about to be flawless. But at the time, all he saw was a guy who, according to him, didn't have the killer instinct. Yeah, sure, Robert, sure. Little did you know, the real predator was me. The breaking point didn't come with fireworks or some dramatic explosion. Nope. It came on a Wednesday morning, just another normal day. Or so I thought. I walked into the office early, like I always did. First one in. Lights still off. The quiet hum of the building before the chaos of emails and meetings took over. I grabbed my coffee, opened my laptop, and started prepping the financial projections for the upcoming board meeting. A meeting that I thought I'd be part of. But then an email popped up. Subject line, Q2 Growth Strategy Presentation. I opened the attachment, and my heart stopped. It was my work, the exact financial model I'd spent weeks building, the revised logistics cost breakdown, the pricing restructure, the forecast analysis, every single chart, every single formula, word for word, number for number, except where my name should have been. It said, "Prepared by Robert Stanton, Chief Executive Officer." I stared at the screen, mouth dry. This wasn't just stealing an idea in a meeting anymore. This was full-on intellectual theft. And to make it worse, a CC line at the bottom showed the entire executive team, the board, and several key investors had already received it. I sat there, hands on the keyboard, fingers trembling not from fear, but from a rage so cold it almost felt peaceful. This man didn't just step over the line, he bulldozed it. And the worst part, he was going to stand in front of that board, flash his perfect smile, and take credit for every late night I spent building that model. The numbers were stellar. They would single-handedly make this the company's strongest quarter in years. And to him, I was just some guy, crunching numbers, making him look good. That's when something inside me clicked. Something permanent. I leaned back in my chair, stared at the glass wall of my office, watching Robert laughing with the VP of sales down the hall like he didn't have a care in the world. And in that moment, I realized something. He thinks he owns this place. He thinks he owns me. But what he doesn't know, what he can't even begin to imagine, is that everything he thinks he owns already belongs to me. He just hasn't figured it out yet. But trust me, he's about to. About an hour after I found that email, I got a ping. An Outlook notification popped up on my screen. Meeting invite, 1:30 p.m., conference room B. Subject, future opportunities. No description, just future opportunities. For a split second, I actually chuckled. Because for the briefest, dumbest moment, part of me thought, maybe they finally see it, maybe this is it. Recognition, a promotion, something. I mean, after everything, after carrying this company on my back for years, maybe someone finally noticed, right? Yeah, right. I clicked accept, and as 1:30 rolled around, I straightened my tie, fixed my collar, smoothed the front of my jacket, and walked toward conference room B. The hallway felt weirdly quiet. No chatter, no movement, just this low electric tension buzzing in the air. When I opened the door, Robert was already sitting there, legs crossed, grinning, like a cat who swallowed an entire flock of canaries. Next to him was Melissa, the HR director, clipboard in hand, eyes darting between her notes and the floor. "Oh, no." My gut tightened. "Daniel," Robert said, voice sugar-coated and fake. "Take a seat." I sat, slowly. Melissa wouldn't even make eye contact. Robert leaned forward, elbows on the table, fingers steepled like he was about to bless me with some grand wisdom. "I'll get straight to the point," he said, adjusting his cufflinks. "The company's evolving. We're pivoting, leaner, more aggressive, more forward-facing." Every word out of his mouth dripped with corporate nonsense. "And after reviewing, well, certain operational redundancies, we've come to a decision." I stared, expressionless. "Effective immediately." He paused, purely for dramatic effect. "We're eliminating your role." My heart didn't sink, it didn't even flinch, because the moment he said it, all that false hope instantly converted into something else. Fuel, pure, undiluted, fuel. Melissa slid a folder across the table. Severance details, NDA clauses, the usual corporate breakup kit. Robert continued, still smirking. "Look, this isn't personal. You've done solid work over the years, but let's be honest, you've always been more back office, operational, not exactly leadership material." I tilted my head, studying him. God, the arrogance, the entitlement. This man genuinely thought this was checkmate. "Of course, you'll need to turn in your laptop, your badge. It will shut down your access by end of day," he added, waving his hand like he was clearing crumbs off a table. And there it was. All those years, all those late nights, all that loyalty, reduced to a single folder, and a fake, patronizing smile. I slowly reached out and took the folder, and smiled right back. "Thank you for the clarity," I said. Robert blinked. For a split second, just a flicker, like his brain didn't quite compute how calmly I took it. But then, the smug grin returned. "Best of luck, Daniel," he said, standing. "I'm sure you'll land on your feet." "Oh, Robert, you have no idea. There's a certain kind of silence that hits you when everyone knows something bad just happened, but nobody wants to say it out loud." That's exactly the sound that filled the office as I walked out of conference room B, holding nothing but that thin, pathetic severance folder. Heads turned, conversations stopped mid-sentence, emails sat unfinished on screens. I could feel it, the weight of every glance, every whispered thought. Did he just get fired? Wait, what did Daniel do? Seriously? They let him go? Some people gave me that awkward, guilty half-smile, the one that says, "Sucks to be you, Das, but I'm glad it's not me." Others didn't even look, pretended like I wasn't there. Eyes glued to screens, fingers tapping keyboards. Just a little too fast, trying way too hard to look busy. Cowards. I walked to my desk. My hands didn't shake, my chest didn't tighten, not even a little, because in that moment, something strange happened. I didn't feel humiliated. I didn't feel broken. I felt free. Free, because I knew something they didn't. Something Robert didn't. Something none of them could even imagine. As I packed my things, I could hear Robert's voice echoing down the hall, laughing, joking, already moving on like I was just deleted, gone. A coffee mug from last year's holiday party, a framed photo of my father and me on the day I graduated, a couple of notebooks, filled with ideas, strategies, solutions that never saw the light of day. Because Robert didn't have the brainpower or the humility to understand them, I slid everything into a small cardboard box. No ceremony, no speech, no goodbye party. Just walk away. But as I walked toward the exit, something caught my eye. Robert, standing near the glass wall of his office, laughing with the VP of marketing. Hand gestures, big smiles. He didn't even glance at me, didn't wave, didn't nod, nothing. To him, I wasn't just fired. I was erased. But oh, he was about to learn. Some people don't stay erased for long. Some people come back with a pen, and they rewrite the whole story. You ever walk out of a building, the same one you walked into for 10 years, and realize you were never really part of it? That's exactly how it felt. The automatic doors slid open. The summer heat hit my face, and for a second, I just stood there, staring back at the glass tower behind me. It looked smaller now. Or maybe I was finally seeing it for what it really was, a hollow monument, a palace built on fake smiles, stolen credit, and the backs of people like me. I took a deep breath, cardboard box in my arms, and walked toward my car. No security guard stopped me. No co-worker ran out to say goodbye. No last-minute handshake and no fake keep in touch. Nothing. It was like I'd never existed. I sat in my car, engine off, just staring at the steering wheel. And for the first time, in a very, very long time, I asked myself the question no one ever wants to ask. Was it all a waste? 10 years. 10 years of grinding, of solving problems no one else could solve, of fixing messes I didn't create, of working late, skipping weekends, missing birthdays, because I thought, this will pay off, this will mean something. 10 years of being told, you're not leadership material. You're great, but you're not a visionary. Maybe next year, we'll consider that promotion. And now, a cardboard box, a severance check, and a polite corporate get lost. The funny thing is, I didn't feel angry. Not yet. I felt numb, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart, through a window. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the silence swallow me. The world kept moving. People walked by, cars honked, birds chirped, completely oblivious that inside this little grey sedan, a storm was quietly starting to form, because sometimes rock bottom isn't the end, sometimes, God, it's the launch pad. And Robert just lit the fuse. You ever notice how sometimes the universe has this weird way of pushing you exactly where you need to be? Yeah, sitting there, in that parking lot, cardboard box on the passenger seat, staring out at nothing. I felt it. A pull, not forward, not yet. Back to where it all started. But hey, before I take you there, if this story's got you hooked so far, and trust me, it only gets crazier, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment. Let me know, what would you do in my shoes? All right, back to it. I started driving. No destination. Just letting the wheels turn while my mind did the same. And without even realizing it, I ended up there. The old house, my father's house, still standing, still exactly how he left it. A little worn, a little faded, but solid, just like him. I pulled into the driveway, killed the engine, and just sat. The memories hit me like a freight train. Sunday mornings on the porch, him reading the paper, coffee in hand, while I sat next to him with my little toy laptop, pretending I was working just like Dad. His voice calm, steady, always teaching, always preparing me for something. Back then, I never really understood what. I got out, unlocked the front door, and stepped inside. The air smelled like wood, old books, and something else. Something heavier. Legacy. That's what it smelled like. The house was filled with pieces of him, framed awards, photos of the first warehouse, the grand opening of the headquarters. My dad, smiling, standing in front of the same glass building Robert just kicked me out of. I walked down the hallway, toward his study. The door was still closed, like it always was when he was working. I hesitated, then pushed it open, and there it was. The same oak desk, the same leather chair, and on the shelf, tucked between dusty finance books, a small locked wooden box. A box I hadn't thought about in years. I ran my fingers over it, the grain smooth, the lock still intact. I remembered, clear as day, the last conversation we had about it. You'll know when it's time, he told me. Not before, not after. When it's time, you open it. And standing there, in that room, heart still bruised, ego still bleeding, I realized it was time. I sat down at that old oak desk, the same one my father spent years behind, building something from nothing. My hands hovered over the little wooden box, fingertips tracing the edges, feeling every scratch, every dent, every memory sealed inside. The key, I remembered exactly where he hid it. Top drawer, beneath the false bottom, right next to an old silver money clip he used to carry back in the day. I slid the drawer open, lifted the panel, and there it was. Tiny, simple, but heavy. Heavy with meaning. I slid it into the lock, turned it. Click. The lid opened. Inside were documents, envelopes, handwritten letters. The first thing I pulled out was a photo. My father, standing in front of the first shipping truck with the company logo freshly painted on the side. His smile, man, it wasn't just pride, it was purpose. And taped to the back of the photo, a note. Daniel, if you're reading this, then the moment I always knew would come, finally did. I sat back and staring at those words. What did he mean? I dug deeper. A letter, written in his sharp, clean handwriting. Son, you've always been the quiet one, the observer, the one who listens before speaking, the one who thinks before acting. The world where it doesn't always reward men like that. It praises the loud, the flashy, the arrogant, the Roberts of the world. But you and I, we know something they don't. Real power doesn't need to scream. I swallowed hard. My chest felt tight, but not from sadness, from something else, a realization, slowly crawling its way into my bones. I flipped through the papers, trust agreements, share certificates, legal documents with my name on them. But the details, the full weight of what it all meant, wasn't clear yet. Not fully. There was another envelope, thicker, sealed, marked. Do not open until your 35th birthday. I stared at it, and that's when it hit me. My birthday, 2 weeks ago. The envelope was meant for right now. My fingers trembled as I held it. Part of me wanted to rip it open right then and there. Another part hesitated, because deep down, I knew whatever was inside this envelope was about to change everything, forever. I sat there and staring at that sealed envelope, fingers tightening around it like it might dissolve if I let go. For a few seconds, I just listened. The old house creaked. Wind pushed against the windows. Somewhere in the kitchen, the fridge kicked on with a low hum. It was like the house itself was holding its breath with me. I tore the envelope open. Inside, another letter, handwritten, just like before. If you're reading this, Daniel, then you've turned 35. And that means it's time. I could hear his voice in my head, clear as if he was sitting right there across from me. Calm, steady, certain. For years, I built this company from the ground up, brick by brick, deal by deal. And for years, I watched people like Robert Stanton circle, waiting, vultures dressed as businessmen, thinking they could chip away at what we built. I knew, one day, one of them would get bold enough to think he could erase you, diminish you, remove you. What he doesn't know, what none of them know, is that the moment he tried to cut you out was the moment he handed you everything. My breath caught. Wait. What? I flipped to the next page. Legal language, trust documentation, asset allocations. I scanned the words, my eyes darting over phrases like irrevocable trust, 90% controlling shares, effective upon beneficiary's 35th birthday. No way. I flipped to the next page, and there it was, my name, in bold, as the sole beneficiary, to 90% of the company's Class B voting stock. I wasn't reading it wrong. I wasn't misunderstanding. I wasn't dreaming. I sat back, staring at the paper, my hands trembling, not from fear, but from something else. Power, quiet, absolute, undeniable power. The same company Robert just fired me from. I owned it. I owned it. Not someday, not hypothetically, not with some vague inheritance clause buried in the future. Right now, right this second. And Robert had absolutely no idea. I let out a slow, shaky breath, leaned forward, and whispered to no one. Game on. I don't think I slept that night. Not a wink. I sat at that old desk and flipping through every document as every clause, every little line my father left for me. It wasn't just ownership, it was control, full voting rights, full decision-making power. The board, the executive team, even Robert, were technically just employees, my employees. They just didn't know it yet. And oh, they were about to. But not yet. Not like this. No. First, I needed ammo. See? I wasn't about to walk in there, swinging papers around, yelling, "Surprise!" That's not how this works. That's not how he taught me. Real power doesn't scream. It whispers, and then it crushes. So, I started digging. I pulled out my old company laptop. Yeah, it had cut me off, but they forgot one thing. The backup drive. The one I kept. The one synced with files they didn't know existed. First, the financials. Oh, Robert, you sloppy, arrogant fool. Bloated executive expenses, unauthorized bonuses, creative accounting that would make an IRS agent pass out. And then, the turnover reports. In the last 2 years alone, employee resignations had spiked 42%, department heads quitting, mid-level managers walking out without notice, entire teams collapsing under toxic leadership. Why? Because Robert ran that company like a kingdom, not a business. Favoritism, nepotism, a boys' club so tight, they probably had matching jackets. And the complaints, oh the complaints, dozens, quietly filed, silently buried. HR pretending they were investigating, sexual harassment, discrimination, hostile work environment, all swept under the rug, for now. I leaned back, steepled my fingers, and smiled. This is going to be easier than I thought. But it wasn't just about taking Robert down. No, it was about showing every single person in that building. Every single person who ever sat through one of his fake pep talks. Every single employee who was passed over, overlooked, dismissed. That the king was never the king, and the man they thought was a shadow was the one holding the crown the entire time. The next morning, I made one phone call, just one, to a name I hadn't dialed in years, but one I always knew I'd need when the time came. Samuel Green, my father's lawyer, the family's lawyer. The kind of man who didn't just handle wills and estates, but knew exactly how to navigate power. "Daniel," he answered, voice calm, steady, like nothing ever surprised him. "Been expecting your call." I blinked. "You have?" A soft chuckle on the other end. "Let's just say your father planned for this day, a long time ago." I leaned back in my chair. "Then you know why I'm calling." "Of course," he said. "You're ready to execute the trust." "Not yet." I paused. "Not exactly." A brief silence. "Go on." "I don't want to just announce it. I don't want to walk in and say, 'Surprise, I own the company.'" Samuel chuckled again. "Good. That's exactly what your father hoped you'd say. I want to do it right, strategic, controlled, surgical. Then we'll start by preparing a shareholder meeting," he replied, already tapping on his keyboard. "Per the trust, as the majority shareholder, you have the legal authority to call one at any time." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "And Robert?" Samuel didn't miss a beat. "Robert will never see it coming. Legally, he has no defense. Once the paperwork is filed, he's finished." A strange, quiet smile crept onto my face. "Perfect. We'll also need to draft resolutions," Samuel continued. "Formal motions for leadership review, a vote to remove the CEO, financial audits, a complete leadership restructure." My jaw tightened. "Yeah, every single one of those." "Very well." He paused, then asked, "Daniel, may I ask, what are you planning exactly?" I stared out the window, watching the morning sun spill over the skyline, watching the same building that just threw me out stand there, tall, proud, clueless. "I'm planning," I said slowly, "to walk into that boardroom and show them exactly who they tried to erase." Samuel chuckled softly. "Your father would be proud." "No," I said, smiling. "He'd say, 'Took you long enough.'" Honest, for the next 48 hours, it was like watching a chessboard set itself up. Samuel moved fast, faster than I ever expected. Drafts, contracts, notifications, motions, every single legal gear started spinning, perfectly oiled, perfectly precise. We scheduled a special shareholder meeting, urgent, mandatory, no agenda listed, just a time, a place, and one line in bold: shareholder authority session, attendance required. Simple, clean, deadly. Meanwhile, I kept quiet, silent, The kind of silence that isn't weakness, but warning. Robert? He had no clue. In fact, from what I heard, he was strutting around the office like a man who just slayed a dragon. People said he was celebrating, that he finally got rid of the dead weight, that now the company could move forward without the bottlenecks. Oh, Robert, you absolute idiot. You're the bottleneck, and your clock is ticking. I spent those 2 days gathering more. Employee testimonies, internal reports, emails, screenshots, every whispered complaint that HR tried to bury, every financial discrepancy hidden behind creative accounting. I wanted more than just to fire Robert. I wanted the entire board to choke on the truth, to realize, in front of everyone, that the man they trusted was nothing more than a fraud wrapped in a designer suit. And me, the man they ignored, dismissed, overlooked, was the one holding the detonator. I sat at my kitchen table that night. Documents spread out like blueprints for a revolution, phone in hand ready to hit send on the meeting notice. I stared at it for a long moment, thumb hovering over the screen, and when I finally pressed it, it wasn't anger I felt. It wasn't even revenge. It was something colder, sharper, a simple, undeniable fact, snapping into place like a puzzle piece that was always meant to be there. This was always mine. You ever notice, right before a storm hits, there's this strange silence. The air gets heavier, the wind dies, and for a moment, everything feels still. That's exactly what the next morning felt like. I woke up, made coffee, sat by the window, and watched the sun crawl over the city skyline. Somewhere in that glass building, Robert was pacing, or maybe laughing, thinking he'd won, thinking he'd erased me. He had no idea that the clock was already ticking down. And hey, if you've made it this far, trust me, the best part is coming. So hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe to the channel. You don't want to miss what happens next, because when I tell you, this isn't just a comeback story. This is a reckoning. Back at headquarters, I could only imagine how the day started. Robert probably strolled in like a king, grinning, chest puffed, no doubt already planning some congratulatory meeting for himself, patting himself on the back for streamlining the company. But there was a problem. By mid-morning, the boardroom calendar updated. Urgent shareholder meeting, 3 hours p.m., attendance mandatory. No details, no explanations. Phones started buzzing, emails started flying, confusion spread like wildfire. Did you know about this? Is this about the quarterly numbers? Wait, why didn't Robert mention it? Inside the walls of that company, something shifted. People started whispering, glancing over their shoulders. And Robert started sweating. Because for a man who lived by control, by always being the smartest guy in the room, nothing, and I mean nothing, scared him more than not knowing who called that meeting, not knowing why, not knowing that the man he fired, the man he dismissed as invisible, irrelevant, disposable, was already on his way. And this time, I wasn't walking in as an employee. I was walking in as something else entirely. By 1 p.m., the office was in chaos. Not loud chaos, no, worse, quiet chaos. The kind where people whisper behind closed doors, glance nervously at their inboxes, refresh their calendars over and over, hoping the meeting would just disappear. It didn't. If anything, the subject line just felt heavier. Urgent shareholder meeting, attendance mandatory. No one knew what it was about, not the CFO, not the VP of operations, not even Robert, especially not Robert. Word had already spread that he was furious, storming down hallways, demanding answers, snapping at assistants. Who scheduled this? Why wasn't I informed? Find out, now. But no one had answers, because there weren't any. At least, not for them. I sat in a quiet cafe downtown, window seat, black coffee, a leather folder sitting on the table in front of me. Inside that folder were documents, not threats, not accusations, facts, numbers, reports, ownership certificates, voting rights, and a printed agenda with exactly one item: executive leadership review, immediate action required. I checked the time, 2:15 p.m., almost showtime. I leaned back, watching the world pass by, people laughing, taxis honking, life moving, completely unaware that inside one boardroom, everything was about to change. Meanwhile, back at the office, Robert was unraveling. He paced his office like a caged animal, barked at his assistant, slammed his desk. "It's probably just a financial review," someone said. "Or maybe a quarterly correction." Another guessed, "Nope, not even close." At 2:50 p.m., the board members started arriving, old men in tailored suits. Some of them had been there since my father's days. Some were newer, handpicked by Robert to be yes men. They walked in, tense, confused, murmuring among themselves. The secretary laid out water. The IT guy checked the projector, but there were no presentations, no slides, just an empty chair and at the head of the table, waiting. At 2:59, Robert stormed in, face flushed, jaw tight. "All right," he barked, tossing his phone on the table. "Let's get this over with. I don't know who thinks they can waste my time with this, but—" And then the elevator chimed. The boardroom door opened and I stepped inside. The moment the boardroom door opened, every head turned, and for a solid 3 seconds, silence. Robert's jaw literally dropped, like you could almost hear it hit the floor. "Daniel," he sputtered, what are you doing here? This meeting is for board members only." I smiled, calm, collected, deadly. "Exactly," I said, dropping the leather folder onto the table. "I'm exactly where I belong," he scoffed, tried to regain control. No, you're not. You're not an employee here anymore. Security—" I raised a hand, slow, controlled. "You're right, Robert," I said, voice steady as steel. "I'm not an employee." I opened the folder, slid the ownership certificates across the table. 1, 2, 3 copies, right to the chairman, the CFO, and the board secretary. "I'm the majority shareholder." Boom. It was like someone pulled the plug on the entire room. Dead. Silent. Robert blinked. Once, twice, 3 times. What are you talking about? That's impossible." The chairman adjusted his glasses, scanned the documents, then looked up, eyes wide. "Is this accurate?" he asked quietly. "Very," I replied. 90% ownership, transferred via irrevocable trust, effective 2 weeks ago, but on my 35th birthday." Robert's face went pale, then red, then pale again. No, there's no way. This is fake. This has to be fake." The board secretary stood, adjusted her blazer. I need to verify this." Samuel, my attorney, stepped forward from behind me. Calm, professional, lethal, all notarized. "Filed with the state, fully compliant with corporate governance," he said, handing her a second folder. "You'll find everything in there." Robert looked at me, mouth opening, closing, like a fish gasping for air. Why didn't I know about this? Why wasn't this disclosed?" I tilted my head. "Because my father knew exactly the kind of man you were, and he structured it perfectly, quietly, legally, completely airtight." The chairman cleared his throat. "Well, in that case, as per protocol, the majority shareholder has the right to call this meeting and to propose leadership changes." I slid another document forward. "Effective immediately," I said, voice crisp. "I'm submitting a motion to remove Robert Stanton from the position of CEO." Robert slammed both hands on the table. "You can't do this. This is illegal. This is—" I didn't even flinch. "Check the bylaws," I said. "Majority ownership doesn't require a second vote." The CFO, who had been dead silent until now, leaned over, scanned the papers, then slowly leaned back, hands raised like he wanted no part in what was about to happen. The chairman sighed, looked around. "In accordance with the bylaws, the motion stands, effective immediately. Robert Stanton is removed as CEO." Silence. Heavy, thick, choking. Robert stood, fists clenched, chest heaving, face somewhere between rage and disbelief. "You," he hissed, "you planned this." I stood, slowly, buttoned my jacket, looked him dead in the eye. "No, Robert, you planned this. The moment you fired me, You wrote your own resignation letter. You just didn't know it yet. Security didn't need to be called. Robert knew. You could see it in his eyes. He was done. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled, and for the first time, the boardroom fell completely, utterly still, except for me. I sat down, at the head of the table, where I always more belonged. Sitting there in that chair, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not triumph, not revenge, peace. Because this wasn't just about power. It was about restoring what was broken, about honoring the legacy my father built, about making this company a place where people were seen, heard, respected. Over the next few weeks, I didn't rush to change everything overnight. I listened. I learned. I promoted the overlooked. I fired the toxic. I rebuilt trust brick by brick. And slowly the office changed. Laughter came back. People stayed late, not out of fear, but because they believed in what we were building again. One day, walking past the engineering bullpen, I saw a simple note on the whiteboard. 3 words written in blue marker, underlined twice. He came back. That was all I needed. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't the noise you make. It's the quiet way you come back stronger, better, unstoppable. And if you've made it this far, thank you for listening. If this story fired you up, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Because every story deserves a second chance. And sometimes justice is just the beginning.